warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much for reminding me of that story, because I had just puked before we had that conversation. I was so nervous in the primary election, and you were talking to me, and it was so nice to take that time to just reflect on what an incredible moment that was. And that was just in the primary election. We hadn't even gotten to the general at that point, so subhanAllah. It is very, very nice to be on the other side of things. For everyone who doesn't know, my name's Nabeela Syed. I am the state representative for the 51st State House District here in Illinois. I was born and raised in Palatine, Illinois. I grew up here in the suburbs of the Chicagoland area, and I'm very proud to call this place my home, but I'm very, very proud and excited to represent this community, not only as a member of the community, but as the first Muslim woman in the Illinois State Legislature, as the first Indian woman in the Illinois State Legislature, and as one of the youngest people elected to the Illinois Legislature. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for welcoming me. And now that you got me thinking about the primary, I've just been reflecting on what a journey this entire campaign has been. And the presentation that the sister just showed, it demonstrated to me how strong this community is. You guys come together for school, you guys come together for Friday prayer, you come together for halakas, the women get together and find space and find comfort in sharing culture, sharing religion. And that is what is so beautiful about our faith. Is that regardless of your background, regardless of where you might, what ethnicity you are, you can find common ground with folks, and you can find brotherhood and sisterhood among people who share our faith. And that to me is just an incredible thing, because my parents, like many of you might have, they immigrated from India in the late 1980s, and it was not easy for them to be Indian immigrants. And they couldn't find that much commonality with folks that were Indian, but they could find a lot of commonality with folks that were Muslim in their communities. And like many young people in this crowd, growing up here, even though I was born here, was not easy. I started wearing a hijab when I was in 9th grade. Growing up, attending the public schools here, different religions, different cultures. Sometimes people didn't understand the kind of food you brought for lunch. And that would make it hard. That would make it hard to fit in. And I remember there were many, many days crying, but to now think that once upon a time, I was out here upset because I didn't feel like I fit in. But now I represent an 80% white district where I still don't fit in. But they still elected me to represent the community, because these things go beyond how someone appears. Sometimes we have these obstacles that we place on ourselves of, oh, well, I wear a hijab on my head. I'm brown, I'm a woman. I might not be able to do this, especially in this 80% white district that I was born and raised in. And I couldn't imagine running for office in any other place. No other place is home. No other place I could represent as effectively as I could the place that I grew up in. But here I was, launching a campaign. And I do have to say, tying back to the strength of community, there were so many people that said, Nabeela, you're a little young. I was 22 at the time. They're like, Nabeela, you're a little young. You're 22 years old. Are you sure you should be doing this? And I was like, no, I'm not sure. I don't think I should be doing this, but I don't know. Something was just tugging me to run for office. Something was pulling at my heart. But there were folks that I hadn't even known that well, that I approached because I knew that they were politically active, and they instantly gave me their support. So I just want to recognize a few people in the crowd that I see. Dr. Jamil is sitting right there. He was a huge supporter of me, and he's now running for office as well. Nazina Hashmi, Nazina Auntie as I call her, was a day one supporter, and I gave her a call when I decided to run, and she said, go for it. And she's actually been telling me to run since I was like 15 years old, and she's also running for office. And then there's also Dr. over there, who has been such a kind and strong supporter. He saw me grow up at my local masjid at ISS in Rolling Meadows. So the day after we launched, I think I went to an event, and Asad was like, I'm glad you're running. And I was so grateful, because hearing from those people that they were glad I was running was so important. When other folks were telling me, other folks that should have been supporting me were saying, Nabeela, this is not your time. You should wait your turn. But the thing is, people won't ask us to run for office. People won't look at us and they won't say, hey, maybe you should step up and lead. And that is why we continue to see the same kind of representation over and over and over again. You look at the US Congress, it is not as diverse as it should be. It is not reflective of what we look like. You know, can you tell me how many Turkish people are in the US Congress or in the Illinois General Assembly? Is it zero? Yeah. It's zero. And no one will approach our communities and ask them to run, no matter how much we care about giving back, no matter how much we care about serving others, no matter how many times we go to homeless shelters and help our brothers and sisters, because it's ingrained in us to do good. It's ingrained in us to care for our neighbors. And no one will recognize the beauty of our religion, of our faith, of our shared values of communities until we put it in front of them. But that's why there were some folks in this room that were instantaneously supported because they understood. So I'm asking you, when someone in this community comes up and they mention interest in political science, when they mention interest in running for office, when they mention interest in pursuing their passions, we support them. We support them and we give them the platform that they need, the assistance that they need to get across the finish line. Because there's oftentimes when we will face doubt from folks that are our peers in school. In high school, I remember I felt like, sometimes uncomfortable. I didn't really get along with some folks that viewed me as being other just because I wore a hijab. But that doesn't stop when you get younger, right? So we need to continue to create this sense of community and protect our community and bolster our community, not just in the political realm, but all realms. So it is an honor to be here today. It is an honor to be among you all. I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to touch on that point of community, and I welcome any questions because I think that's when things get a little bit more fun. So, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for having me. Did I answer everything? Oh my goodness, and that is wrong of me, because where I should have started? First, by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then second, thanking my parents. And something I would just want to say for the parents in the crowd is, I wouldn't have run for office if it were not for my parents. I would not have had the audacity or the courage to run for office if my mother and father didn't say that they believed in me. And I'll be honest, my mother was first. My dad, he's a little slow to things. He'll come around eventually, but that's how fathers are. But my mom, when I told her that I was considering this and how nervous I was, she said, Nabeela, if you don't step up to run in this community, we're not going to get a Muslim elected in this cycle. We're not going to get a Muslim woman elected in this cycle. And I was like, what do you know about politics, Mom? Like, where are you coming at me with this? But somehow she knew, and she was right. There wasn't another Muslim woman running for state house. This is the first time a Muslim has ever been elected to the Illinois General Assembly. And we have the highest per capita population of Muslims. And this is the first time ever. And you think, why is this the reason? Why do we have so many Muslims but such little representation? And it was one of those things I mentioned about, some folks not necessarily asking us, they don't necessarily encourage us. But it is important as a community, as parents, that we take the young people in our community and we see their skill and their possibilities and their capabilities and we encourage them. And I will say, like, my mother was that person for me. She's the one that said, Nabeela, if you don't do it, who will? And I think right now they're tired of all this campaign stuff. I've been dragging them from event to event, but they see me every single day, go to work. I go down to Springfield, they miss me when I'm gone, and alhamdulillah, I have been so blessed to have parents as kind, as patient, as nurturing as mine. And every quality, everything that I do is because of the way that they raised me. This didn't come from me, this came from my parents. So alhamdulillah, I'm very, very grateful and very, very glad that you asked that question because you reminded me. Yes.
Yeah, mashallah, we are very proud of you, Nabeela. So would you tell the youngsters around here, how was your first day at Springfield, and did you take an oath and did you use the Quran? Can you tell these people around here, how was the experience?
Yeah, so I went down for inauguration on January 11th. So January 11th was my first day of work. Before that, I was not anything, a state employee at all. But we still had to set up our district office. I still had to hire my chief of staff, the person that manages my schedule. And I couldn't do anything until we were officially inaugurated. So I went down there with my family, and they were all excited. And I wanted to wear a part of my culture. So I wore a suit similar to this. It was a nice green suit, but then I wore a dupatta, in India. One of the dupattas my grandma got me from India. So that it would be a reminder of who I am and the community that I come from. And I was wearing a hijab. Of course, I'm always wearing a hijab. But it was so nice to be up on that stage, not only looking the way I look, but also being as young as I am. And, it's tough going into these spaces. Like, let me tell you, these spaces are typically just older white men, right? And I didn't grow up hanging out with old white men. I grew up hanging out with my peers. And now I'm being immersed in these spaces where people don't look like me, they don't have my background, they don't have my experience, but somehow every single step of the way they've been so kind and so welcoming and inclusive. And that goes to show that, sometimes we'll put it in our own heads that, maybe it'll be hard for me to fit in, maybe it will be hard for me to do this. And I end up creating some obstacles for myself because of that mentality. But alhamdulillah, you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything becomes easier. So it was incredible. We did not have to swear on anything. We just had to lift up our hands. So no one was really using a Bible or a Quran or a Torah or anything like that, which would have been really cool because they did that in Minnesota. And my friend who's in state senate in Minnesota had a huge Quran. That Brother Keith Ellison, who's the Minnesota Attorney General, he swore on that Quran as well. So, inshallah in Illinois we'll get to that point. Not there yet, but it was a very surreal experience.
Are there some instances that you would like to share with us during the campaign time, some important aspects of your campaign?
Yeah, so the one thing I wanted to share was I had, we had the primary election. And just for context, for those of you that don't know, you have a primary election and you have a general election when you're running for office. So for my specific area, this area has been held by a Republican, and I was running as a Democrat. But in order to get the Democratic nomination, in order to actually run against the Republican on November 8th, I had to run against another Democrat on June 28th of 2022. And my opponent had launched her campaign 4 months before me. She launched in August of 2021. I launched my campaign in October of 2021. And I remember since then people were saying, Nabeela, it's not your time, wait your turn, let this woman run for office. She's middle-aged, she's white, she can, she represents the area more. And that's what people were saying to me. And it was hard for me to hear that. Because like I said, I'm very proud that I grew up in that area. I'm very proud that I went to the public schools in that area. But somehow this woman, just because she's white, would be able to represent the community more than I did. So we heard that. We heard that over and over and over again. But then I think one of the most surreal moments was on Election Day, on June 28th. We won our primary with 72% of the vote. Wow. 72% of the vote. And it was all those things that people considered obstacles: hijab, not showing my hair, being brown in a predominantly white area, being young, being 22, 23. It ended up it didn't even matter. It didn't even matter. So we sat back after that and we're like, why didn't we get to 80? No, I'm kidding. But we really were pinching ourselves because everyone kept saying this. But when you put in the work, when you knock on doors, when you have the conversations, it goes beyond all that. It goes beyond that, and that's why I keep restating this over and over again. There is no space where we don't belong. There is absolutely no space where we don't belong. And sometimes we have to force our way in. Sometimes we have to go through uncomfortable conversations. But when we get there, we are there. And I can't even tell you how important it is. So I'm not the only Muslim now. Abdul Nasser Rashid, he is a Palestinian man from the Bridgeview area. His district covers a portion of Bridgeview. He also got elected this cycle in a very competitive primary election. And it is so important for me and Abdul Nasser to be there, because before there wasn't a single Muslim. And inshallah there will be more. But when there are issues coming up that affect our community, there's no one that is on the House floor that has our unique background. So I don't even know how I got from that to that. But so we went from 72% of the vote to finally having 2 Muslims in the Illinois State Legislature, which is huge. So I will say that was one of the surreal moments. And then another one was someone else coming up to me and saying that he voted for Trump twice, but he's going to go in and vote for me just because I spoke to him. I was like, Trump? I was like, Trump, you voted for that man, and now you're voting for a woman that wears a hijab? Like, you think about that, and you're like, and there was another man on election day that said, I have never voted for a Democrat in my life, but you are the only Democrat I'm going to vote for. He voted for Darren Bailey, and then he voted for me. And I was like, man, am I appealing to the wrong crowd? But it was just face-to-face conversations and being my genuine self and having our campaign team be as genuine. And honestly, you know, unless Monotella was putting down miracles everywhere, so it might have been a miracle too. But to think that Trump supporters, that Republicans that had never voted for a Democrat in their entire life were casting their ballot for a hijab-wearing woman, I thought that was absurd.
What's the biggest motive that leads you to the politics? Trump may be one of them?
Yes. We didn't talk about that, didn't we? So when I was in high school, how many of you are in high school right now?
High school, like.
Not many of you? Some of you? So, oh, okay, this is a high school table, okay. I was in high school when Trump got elected. And I feel like I sound like I'm old now. I'm only 23, okay? But it was 2016, Trump got elected, and I went from classroom to classroom to classroom crying my eyes out. And there were kids that were walking in the hallway, they were wearing their Make America Great Again red hats, and it felt like they were mocking me, like they were laughing in my face. And you could see me, eyes puffy, my teachers were coming to the bathroom to console me, and it was not an easy day for me. And it was not an easy day for many, many people in this country because we had a president that was talking about the Muslim ban. You know, he was talking about banning our people, my community, that I thought, I grew up, I was like, we're such a loving, generous, kind community. Muslims are the most generous people in this entire country. And somehow he's talking about banning us. And banning people that immigrate from these certain countries. And to me, that was a turning point. Thank you. To me, why are people so intent on pushing us out? Why are they so intent on not letting us have representation? And that's where I was like, we need to demand space. We need to create space for ourselves. So there are going to be people that make you feel small, especially in high school. It's like a nice little breeding ground for bullying. And there are going to be people that make you feel small, make you feel like you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be doing those things, but you should. Because this country is just as much ours as it is anyone else's. This is our home. This is our place to make better. And sorry, the last thing I will say on that point is, my parents came here and this country, alhamdulillah, gave them so much opportunity, gave them so much. And they felt hesitant to criticize it. They felt hesitant to point out the flaws because we owe this country a lot. But this country owes us too. You know, we are what make this country great. Our diversity, our generosity, the way we support folks in our community, we are what make this country great too. So we have just a right as much as anyone else to, you know, criticize the government and to fight for its improvement too.
While going to the politics, when you felt yourself unsure, when you wanted to give up on what people were saying to you, it's like yours, how do you take yourself out from that situation?
Yeah, but so the question was, you know, when people were kind of telling me not to do this, when they were being discouraging, how did I pick myself up? How did I get myself to continue doing this? Now, I'll be honest, the first day someone told me that I couldn't represent this community, this was 2 days before we launched the campaign, I stayed in bed for those 2 days crying. Oh. And it was my parents that pulled me out of that. My parents were like, Nabeela, you're really going to listen to this woman and let her tell you that you can't do this? When your parents who know you the best are telling you that you can do this? And my brother was there too, and he's like, you're being a fool, Nabeela. Like, why are you listening to these people when you're not even listening to your own family? And that is what pulled me out of it. It was my family, it was the support, and it was one of my good friends. She's the one that she told me to run for office. Her name's Anusha. And she kept reminding me, she's like, Nabeela, these people are just gonna come after us. But if we do the work, and if we do the work right, you'll get across the finish line. We'll be fine. And that's what we did. We knew what we were doing. We had a plan. We knew that you had to knock on doors. We had to raise money to communicate our message. And we just kept doing that and doing that and doing that. And that's how we won with 72%. And then in the general election, we won, I think, with 6.6% of the vote. So it was a thinner margin. But like I said, it was a Republican area. And even in the general, people were like, Nabeela, you won the primary, good job, you know, you killed it, but you're not going to win in the general. And we had to do the same exact process of ignoring the people that were doubting us and focusing on the love and support that I was getting. Yeah.
So what's the next step?
The next step is to stay in the Illinois House and to do good. We are so uniquely positioned in Illinois. Just for context, we are so uniquely positioned in Illinois. We have 78 Democrats that are elected. And that means it's easier to get good things done. So recently, in the last General Assembly, the Illinois State Legislature expanded access to Medicaid for folks that are undocumented, so they don't have their citizenship, but they're over 45 years of age or 44 years of age. And now they're looking to increase that to 18 plus. So anyone who's 18 plus might not have been able to get citizenship can still get access to Medicaid. And you know how important that is? How important it is to get health care? And you won't see any other state doing that besides states that have as strong of an advantage as us. But the US Congress, unfortunately, they're gridlocked. They have a Republican majority in the House, a Democratic majority in the Senate. The president is a Democrat. It's tough for people to get things done. So I think here in Illinois, there's a huge potential to make a positive impact. There's a huge potential to help our brothers and sisters. And that's what makes me so excited about state politics. You know, it is very nice to be living in Illinois. I know the property taxes are a bit killer, but we're working on that too. So
we want to see you in the coming 15 years, the President of America.
I don't know about the presidency. If I lose my hair, at least no one will be able to know. But inshallah, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks is best. And I think the last thing I'll say is, related to that, Allah knows best, right? If there's anything that we could root ourselves in, it's I never say no to anything, and I usually rarely say yes to some things, but whatever the future holds, like it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to happen. And I think that has given me the greatest comfort throughout this entire campaign. Yes. Oh, you're so sweet. You're so kind. See, that's giving a voice to the voiceless. Like, mashallah, mashallah.
Lots of people very nice here, and you're a nice person. And politics is a little dirty and some wiggly. I hope you can stand for it. Can you tell us how you would like to be stand straight in that politics?
So how to avoid corruption, how to avoid all that. I'd say praying 5 times a day. Because there's nothing that reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and of our faith more than just practicing our religion. And I will say it's so nice to go in with Abdul Nasser, who is also Muslim, and to have that kind of reminder. He sits right next to me on the Illinois floor. You know, and we both were last in terms of picking our seats. We didn't really get a choice. But subhanAllah, somehow we're still next to each other. Even our offices in the building are right next to each other. And it is so nice to have someone who's Muslim there to constantly remind me of our faith. Because if I'm steadfast on our faith, then inshallah I'm staying insulated away from the corruption and the bad things that kind of happen. And I do think like wearing a hijab is such a blessing. Just because I'm visibly Muslim, people know where my boundaries lie. And it is such a blessing to be in this space and so comfortable as it's not, you know, I didn't grow up being as comfortable wearing a hijab. You know, I grew up not wanting to, I chose to wear a hijab in 9th grade, but it was a decision that I struggled with, I really grappled with. But I feel like, alhamdulillah, I've come to a point where I'm very comfortable with my decision, and I know it's not easy. I know lots of folks that do wear or don't wear are struggling with those decisions, but I think for me, wearing a hijab, being constantly reminded of my faith, like there's no escaping this, right? Like there's no escaping it, is the biggest way for me to stay free of corruption. And inshallah, the dua that you all will be making for me will also keep me free from any of that.
We would like to, like you and Dr. Nasser and the Muslims, make Illinois the first state in the United States to pass a bill for Ramadan as a holiday, not only for the students, even to the people who go out and work. Can you guys do that and bring up a...
Yes, I think it might, that one's, so right now you could take Ramadan off as an excused holiday. So as long as your parents call you, or not Ramadan, Eid off. If you take Ramadan off, they're going to be like, get out of school. You can take Eid off, but it's not necessarily a state holiday. And the only difficulty with that is because there's so many faiths that don't have a state holiday right now, so there might be too many days off that are being taken. But it is important that we create laws that protect from retaliation in case someone does want to take a day off for Eid, and protect employees, especially in jobs that are a bit more vulnerable, like the trades, like making sure that folks are being protected in those jobs where they're viewed as being indispensable, and taking one day off might threaten their employment.
What's your biggest or seemingly most unreachable goal for being in office?
Seemingly most unreachable.
Like the biggest one, maybe you can dream of it. You don't know.
Like in office?
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough. I don't know. I feel so. I'm thinking of some of the bills that I'm proposing, and there are a lot of gun violence prevention bills that I'm very passionate about. There are many people that are dying because of gun violence. Like, that's just point blank a fact, and it is scary to me to think of how our communities, they go in these masses to, like, we all go to Friday for Jummah prayer. There's a big group of Muslims at every single masjid, at every single community center, because we observe Friday prayer, like we go and pray. And it scares me to think about the weaponry that is out there. And I think oftentimes we think that more guns are the solution, when I'm a strong proponent for making sure that guns just don't get in the hands of dangerous people. We don't want to pull the guns away from people. We don't want to attack the Second Amendment rights. But we do have a gun problem in this country. So in this state, at least, a lot of the bills that I am very passionate about, that I'm going to be proposing, are related to gun violence. But the concerns over whether or not they'll actually happen is the more difficult to reach part. But alhamdulillah, I think in terms of this position, there's a lot that you could think of, and inshallah, a lot that we can actually reach. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Nabeela. It's not a question, but it's a request. Since you are representing the Muslim community now in the House, would you be vigilant and keep an eye on any bill moving forward with a Muslim name, or a South Asian, or a Middle Eastern name written on it?
Yes, and we have had that issue.
The reason I'm asking you is because, if you know, last year there was a bill passed which is called Indian Advocacy Council, which was voted unanimously in both houses and signed by the governor last June. And they basically eliminated 20% of the Indian population, which is Muslims, as non-citizens of India. It was a ridiculous bill. Thank God we worked hard to reverse it, and Ram Valigan passed this in the Senate, and Theresa sponsored it, and we got it passed this January. We don't want situations like that happen. Since you're there representing us, any Muslim character bill coming up, we should promise to keep an eye on and be a little vigilant.
Yes. Really quickly, Kader Uncle, are you also running for something? You are, right? Not this time. Okay, well, I missed Kader Uncle in case he was. But yes, and that's why it's so important that we have Min Abdul Nasser there. Because we have to legislate on behalf of our districts, we have to legislate on behalf of the greater community, but no one is going to be looking out for bills that might sneak things in that hurt our communities as much as we will be. And I can tell you with some little bit of detail that we're already doing that we are already making sure we're working to protect our communities and protect our identities as much as possible, because before we couldn't do that. And now, alhamdulillah, because of you all, and because of the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have 2 seats at the table. And inshallah more. So if anyone wants to run for office here, State House, let me know. I'm looking at you young people, okay?
Once again, about how they pass the bill, we have to be vigilant about that. Like in the U.S. House, they passed a bill for LGBTQ, but they put it under the thing like interracial marriages. If you say no to that bill, LGBTQ bill, then you are saying no to interracial marriages. So they're very sneaky about how to hide those important things under the major things. So that's how all Ilham Umar and all ended up saying okay for LGBTQ marriages, because if you said no, that means you're saying no to interracial marriages too. So it's very sneaky, and we have to be very careful and make sure that they do not do that and play double standards.
Oh, you want me to?
Yes, I'd like to invite Dr. July Yushan to present a gift to Nabeela Syed.
So this will actually be, I didn't know this was mine, I was admiring it from afar, but this will be in my Springfield office. So I will put it
Thank you so much, David. Can we get one more round of applause for Nabeela, please?